My son bought his wife a house and then handed me the mortgage documents. "You have saved enough," he said. "It is time to help your family." I said no. They sued me for $900,000, and the judge asked me exactly one question. My name is Walter Reynolds, but most people call me Walt. I am 72 years old, and I spent more than 4 decades working as an industrial maintenance supervisor, keeping factories running, fixing breakdowns at 3 a.m., and solving problems nobody else wanted to touch. I earned every dollar with my hands, while my son, Evan, grew up in a very different world. I thought I had seen everything life could throw at a man. I was wrong, because nothing prepares you for the day your own child decides your retirement is his personal safety net. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to stand up to family, like and subscribe. It all started on a humid Saturday afternoon in late July. I was driving my old 2007 Ford pickup through a neighborhood that smelled like borrowed money. The kind of place where the lawns look trimmed with scissors and the houses sit behind gates that scream status instead of security. I checked the address again. 6 months earlier, Evan had been calling me for gas money. He said he had been laid off from his sales job due to company restructuring. What I knew was chronic lateness and excuses. Now he was inviting me to a housewarming party at a 5-bedroom mansion. I pulled up to the curb. My truck isn't pretty. Rust on the wheel wells, a dent in the tailgate from a Cheapside accident years ago. But the engine runs clean, and it's paid off. I parked it behind a brand new black luxury SUV with temporary dealer plates still on it. Before I could even turn off the engine, the front door flew open. It was Lydia, my daughter-in-law. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She walked down the driveway in heels that clicked sharply against the pavement like a warning. "Walt," she said, "you can't park that thing here." I stepped out of the truck and adjusted my cap. "Good to see you too, Lydia. Congratulations on the house." She stared at my truck like it was contaminating the driveway. "Seriously, the neighbors are going to talk. Can you move it around the corner? Maybe a couple of streets down. We're expecting important guests." I glanced at the SUV. "Nice car," I said calmly. "Is that yours?" Her posture straightened instantly. "It is," she said, smoothing her designer dress. "Evan surprised me with it last week. We needed something reliable for this new chapter in our lives." I leaned against my truck door. Reliable is something that's paid for. Reliable is money in the bank, not sitting in your driveway. I paused. "So tell me, Lydia, how did you afford all this?" Her eyes narrowed. "We're investing in our future," she said. "Evan has some very exciting ventures starting up. You wouldn't understand. You've always been comfortable just being a worker." That one landed. Being a worker kept factories running for 30 years. Being a worker paid for Evan's college degree, the one he never uses. "I'm not moving the truck," I said, calm but firm. "If your neighbors are offended by an honest vehicle, that sounds like their problem." I grabbed the bottle of whiskey I'd brought as a gift and walked past her. She exhaled sharply and pulled out her phone. Walking up that driveway felt like walking into a trap. I just didn't know yet how deep it went. Inside the house, everything felt staged. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of expensive candles and new furniture that hadn't been lived on yet. The foyer rose 2 stories high, crowned with a chandelier so oversized it looked like it had been installed to intimidate rather than illuminate. People stood around in clusters holding wine glasses, laughing too loudly. The kind of laughter that never quite reaches the eyes. I recognized the type. I'd wired buildings full of them. They talk about money the way fishermen talk about storms, always exaggerating, always competing. I spotted Evan near the kitchen island, which was covered in carefully arranged charcuterie boards. He was wearing a blazer over a t-shirt, trying to look relaxed and important at the same time. When he saw me, his smile flickered for half a second, before settling into something rehearsed. "Dad," he said, clapping me on the shoulder instead of hugging me. "Quite a place," I said, looking around. 5 bedrooms for 3 people. He laughed loudly, glancing at the people nearby to make sure they heard. "We don't clean," he said. "We outsource." He handed me a glass of wine without asking if I wanted one, then steered me toward a group of men deep in conversation. "This is my father," Evan announced. "He worked as a maintenance supervisor in factories back in the day." The way he said it made me feel like an artifact. One of the men, a guy with teeth too white to be natural, looked me up and down. "That's cute," he said. "I wouldn't even know where to start with tools." They laughed. Evan laughed the hardest. "It's not hard," I said calmly. "You just have to be willing to get your hands dirty." The laughter faded. Evan cleared his throat. "Dad, why don't you go say hi to Noah?" My grandson. That was the only reason I was still there. I found Noah in a room filled with screens, 3 gaming consoles, LED lights lining the walls, and a television bigger than any I'd ever owned. He was 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor. He shouted when he saw me, dropping the controller and running over. I hugged him tight. "This house is huge," I said. He leaned in and whispered, "Mom says I can't touch the walls, and I can't play in the living room." That hit harder than any insult. A house that expensive, and a child afraid to live in it. I sat with him for nearly an hour, listening to him talk about video games and school. It was the most genuine conversation in the entire house. Eventually, Lydia appeared in the doorway. "Dinner," she said sharply. "And Noah, wash your hands twice." Dinner was a performance. Steaks served on square plates, wine that tasted like money and oak, conversations about vacations, private schools, boats, and investments no one fully explained. I mostly listened. I have a habit of watching hands. Hands don't lie. Evan's hands shook every time he lifted his glass. There was a tremor there, subtle but constant. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. I'd seen that look before. It's the look of a man juggling knives, terrified one of them is about to fall. When coffee was served, Evan stood and tapped his glass. "Thank you all for coming," he said. Then he looked at me. The guests clapped politely. Lydia smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind you see right before someone shows their cards. The study was lined with empty bookshelves, furniture without substance. Evan sat behind a large desk and gestured for me to sit. Lydia closed the door and leaned against it. Evan asked, loosening his tie. "It's impressive," I said honestly. He waved a hand. "It's a transition period. I've launched a consulting business." "Projections," I repeated. "That's how growth works," Lydia said, stepping forward. She placed a thick folder on the desk. I did. Mortgage papers, purchase price, $800,000, loan amount, $600,000, adjustable interest rate. Then I saw my name. Co-borrower, Walter Reynolds. I closed the folder. "No," I said. Evan stood up. "Dad, you have the money. You sold property. You have your pension." "That money is my retirement," I said calmly. Lydia stepped closer. "You're selfish," she said. "You're old and alone. Don't bring my grandson into this, I said. Then Evan admitted it. They'd already closed on the house. They assumed I'd pay. That's when I knew. This wasn't a request. It was a plan. And I was supposed to be the exit strategy. I stood up. I am a father, I said quietly. I poured the wine onto the white rug. Gasps. Lydia screamed. I walked out. Behind me, Evan shouted that they'd be ruined. Ahead of me, I knew something else. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I didn't go home to sleep. I went home to think. The drive back was silent. No radio, no phone. Just the sound of my 2007 Ford engine humming steadily, the same way it always had. That truck had never surprised me. It never promised more than it could deliver. It simply did its job. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a long moment, hands on the wheel. The threat Lydia made echoed in my head. You'll never see him again. They thought that was the lever. They thought fear would turn me into an open checkbook. They underestimated me. I went inside, took off my jacket, and poured myself a glass of cheap whiskey, the kind I actually like. I didn't turn on the TV. I went straight to the small home office off my kitchen, the one filled with old manuals, folders, and a metal filing cabinet that still had the original key taped to the back. That cabinet held my life. Pensions, property sales, bank statements, insurance documents. Everything I'd earned the slow way. As I sat down, my computer chimed. A credit alert. I almost ignored it. At my age, those alerts usually mean nothing, some data breach or a harmless inquiry. But something told me not to this time. I clicked. My stomach tightened. My credit score had dropped. Not a little. Hard. I refreshed the page. 3 new credit cards. None of them were mine. A platinum card. A travel card. A high-limit retail card. Total balance, $50,000. The billing address stopped me cold. Evan's new house. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Then the picture became painfully clear. This wasn't just about the mortgage. They hadn't waited for my answer. They had already started helping themselves. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. What I felt was colder than anger. Clarity. Evan had my information. He helped me with Medicare forms months earlier. I remembered him saying, "Dad, let me handle it." I had trusted him. I picked up the phone. I didn't call Evan. I called the fraud department. "I need to report identity theft," I said calmly. The operator asked. I looked at a framed photo on my desk. Evan at 10 years old, holding his first fish, smiling like the world was still simple. I turned the frame face down. "Yes," I said. I spent the next 3 hours freezing accounts, filing reports, locking down my credit. I slept better than I had in days, because once you accept betrayal, hesitation disappears. Evan. I let it go to voicemail. Again. Then a text. "Dad, what did you do?" The card was declined. "Call me." I deleted it. I showered, dressed neatly, not a suit, just clean clothes, and drove to the police station. The officer at the desk knew me. I'd wired his garage years earlier. "I need to file a report," I said. "Financial fraud." His expression changed. Saying it out loud felt strange, like crossing a line you never thought you'd approach. But they crossed it first. 2 days later, the knock came. A sheriff's deputy stood on my porch with a thick envelope. They were suing me. $900,000. Breach of contract. Emotional distress. Promises I never made. I smiled. Not because it was funny, because now I knew exactly what game they were playing. They weren't angry. They were desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. I called my lawyer that afternoon. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said one sentence that told me everything. Good. I didn't plan to. That evening, I received a voicemail from Lydia. She was screaming. You froze the accounts. Do you know what you've done? Contractors are here. Movers are here. You are going to fix this, or I swear, I saved the voicemail. Evidence. The next day, I tried to do one thing that still mattered to me. I took a small wrapped box and drove to my grandson's school. Inside was a brass compass my father had given me when I was 8. I'd been saving it for him. The security guard stopped me at the door. I didn't understand at first. Then he showed me the paperwork. I was listed as unstable, a potential threat. I stood there, holding that box, realizing they weren't just cutting me off. They were erasing me. 2 hours later, police showed up at my house. A formal warning. No contact, no visits, no calls. If they had to come back, I'd be arrested. When they left, I sat alone in my living room, the house quiet around me. That's when it hit me. This wasn't emotional. It was strategic. They were building a paper trail, setting me up as the villain, possibly even trying for control over my assets. Guardianship. I opened a notebook and started writing. Dates, times, names, badge numbers. If they wanted documentation, I'd give them volumes. That night, my phone rang. Evan. I answered, but didn't speak. Dad, he slurred. Just unfreeze the cards, sign the papers. I listened. Then I hung up. I slept peacefully, because now I knew something they didn't. They needed me, and I no longer needed them. By the time the lawsuit papers were sitting on my kitchen table, the shock had worn off. What remained was focus. I read every page slowly. 40 pages of claims, half-truths, and outright lies. According to Evan and Lydia, I had promised them a house years ago. According to them, I had encouraged them to take financial risks. According to them, my refusal had caused severe emotional trauma. I recognized the pattern. They weren't trying to win in court. They were trying to scare me into paying. I called Ms. Harrington, the attorney who had handled my estate planning since my wife passed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush me. She listened. When I finished, she said, "They've overplayed their hand." I brought the documents to her office the next morning. She read them once and then a second time. "They've accused you of harassment," she said. "That gives us leverage." Leverage. It was the first hopeful word I'd heard in days. She explained it calmly. If they were claiming emotional distress and instability, they would have to prove it. That meant opening their finances, their credit history, and their timeline to scrutiny. "They think you're a frightened old man," she said. "They're wrong." She advised patience. Let them talk. Let them threaten. Let them document their own lies. Before I left, she asked one question. "Do you want this to end quietly, or do you want the truth on record?" I thought of my grandson being told I was dangerous. I thought of my name dragged through police reports and school files. I want the truth, I said. She nodded once. Then she made a call. The next step was an accountant. Not the kind that balances checkbooks. The kind that follows money like a bloodhound. If Evan claimed damages, every dollar he spent would become relevant. I went home and waited. 2 days later, another message came through from Evan. This time, his voice was calmer. "We're willing to settle," he said. "Just sign over the house you live in. We'll drop the lawsuit." I laughed out loud. They weren't backing down. They were escalating. And in doing so, they were leaving fingerprints everywhere. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The lawsuit folder closed in front of me. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel cornered. I felt prepared. They had numbers. I had facts. They had threats. I had time. And time I'd learned over 40 years of careful work always favors the man who doesn't panic. The settlement offer arrived the next morning. Not by email, not by phone, by courier. A thick envelope with a law firm's letterhead, heavy paper meant to intimidate. I opened it at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd paid bills for decades without ever missing a due date. The language was polite, almost caring. They said they wanted to avoid a painful family conflict. They said they wanted a mutual release. They said they were being generous. Then I reached the terms. They wanted my house. Not the big one. Not the mansion they couldn't afford. Mine. The fully paid-off home I'd lived in for over 30 years. The one my wife and I had rebuilt room by room. The one they now referred to as a suitable asset for resolution. In exchange, they would drop the lawsuit. They even added a paragraph offering to help place me in an assisted living facility. I read that line twice. Not because I didn't understand it, because I did. They weren't just after money anymore. They wanted control. They wanted to erase me quietly and take what was left. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I picked up the phone and called Ms. Harrington. She didn't sound surprised. "They're trying to force a settlement before discovery," she said. "That means they're hiding something." "What do we do?" I asked. "We let them file," she said. "Once they go on record, they can't run." That afternoon, Evan called. His voice was tight, controlled. "This doesn't have to get ugly, Dad," he said. "Just be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I replied. "I'm letting the court see everything." There was a pause, then anger. "You're going to regret this," he said. I almost believed him. Almost. But fear only works when you don't understand the game. And by then, I understood it perfectly. They needed speed. I needed patience. They needed me to panic. I needed them to talk. I hung up the phone and sat quietly. Outside, the afternoon light hit the windows just right. For the first time since this began, I felt something settle inside me. They thought the lawsuit gave them power. They were wrong. It gave me a spotlight. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. No drama, no raised voices, just wood, paper, and patience. Evan and Lydia sat across the aisle from me. Evan wouldn't look up. Lydia stared straight ahead, jaw tight, hands clenched around a legal pad she never wrote on. When the judge entered, everything stopped. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about facts. Their lawyer spoke first. He talked about promises, about expectations, about how I had encouraged them to build a future they could no longer afford. He painted a picture of me as a controlling, unstable old man who changed his mind and shattered a young family. When he finished, the judge turned to my attorney. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She handed the clerk a folder. Bank records, credit reports, fraud affidavits, police reports, voicemails. Then she said something simple. "Your Honor, before we discuss promises, we need to discuss theft." The room changed. The judge read silently for a long time. Then he looked up and asked me one question. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, "did you authorize your son or his wife to open credit accounts in your name?" "No," I answered. That was it. No speech, no explanation, just the truth. Evan's lawyer stood up quickly, but the judge held up a hand. "These accounts," the judge said, tapping the papers, "were used to fund a lifestyle the plaintiffs could not afford, and they were opened using the defendant's identity." He turned to Evan. "Do you dispute that?" Evan didn't answer. Lydia finally spoke. "This is being taken out of context." The judge cut her off. "This court does not deal in context," he said. "It deals in evidence." He dismissed their claims one by one. Breach of contract, denied. Emotional distress, denied. Damages, denied. Then he addressed the fraud. "This matter," he said, "is referred for further investigation." The gavel came down. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Evan tried to speak to me. I didn't stop. Some lessons don't need words. I drove home in my 2007 Ford pickup, parked in my driveway, and sat for a moment with the engine off. My house was still mine. My name was still clean. My dignity intact. I don't know what will happen to my son, but I know this. Standing your ground doesn't make you heartless. Sometimes it's the only way to stay whole. And at my age, that matters more than anything.